welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm Jeremy Lott. Joining me today is the Center Square's State House reporter, Brett Davis. Angie Dowell's fight to keep the man who murdered her father behind bars epitomized the spirit of Wednesday afternoon's crime victims' call to action on the north steps of the Capitol building in Olympia, Washington. Her father, Loran Dowell, was murdered in a 1980 robbery of the Red Barn Tavern in South King County that claimed 2 other lives as well. Brett, talk to me about this rally and what could happen in this case.
Well, as you mentioned, there was a crime victims call to action rally. It was put together by Reps Michelle Caldier and Rep Jenny Graham, both of whom have had personal experiences with the crime, which I wasn't aware of until I got to the event. Rep Jenny Graham, her sister, was a victim of the notorious Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. Michelle Caldier, she detailed how when she was a young child, her mother apparently married a very horrible man, as she described, and that ended up abusing both her and her sister. She talked about how she had to take her 7-year-old sister to get a rape kit done. So that was very emotional, very gruesome stuff. So basically, the gist of the gathering was the word unbalanced or imbalanced was used a lot. People were talking about how it seems criminals have a lot more rights than the victims of crime. Legislators were talking about what they could do to change that. Yeah,
I mean, there have been some notable pieces of legislation that have they haven't cleared both chambers. But I wrote a piece about how if my brother were to go to jail and I was to try to give him some money for the commissary, the deductions can be insane. You literally are looking at, you have to give, in some cases, $900 for him to get $100 in his commissary account to buy things like toilet paper. And they've done other things like that in this session that I think most people looking at it are like, yeah, that sounds reasonable. But, the other side of the coin is there have been, attempts to curb the pursuit law or change make it so that drug possession isn't re-legalized, which is what would happen if they passed nothing by July 1st.
There was also mention of other, attempts at legislation that they didn't care for, and, restrictions on firearms, banning assault weapons, but the establishment of a domestic violence extremism commission, things like that. They didn't regard those things as helpful at all. They wanted more of the focus to be on, people impacted by crime, like the person you mentioned at the beginning in your opening. The person who committed the crime was actually at one point scheduled to be set free last July, but Governor Jay Inslee blocked it. But now apparently it's gone to the Court of Appeals Division 1, and the next month or so it will be decided whether this person, gets released on parole or not. So.
Because the parole board had decided, let him go. And Jay Inslee apparently has some, final say. And Inslee said, there's something missing from this man talking about what he did. And it's that I don't see any remorse here. And so I'm not willing to let a man out into the public who committed such a grisly crime with no audible indication that, that he's sorry for what he did. John Braun, at the time, he's the Senate Republican leader, praised Inslee and said, I don't think that the remorse should matter as much as he didn't let a grisly murderer back out into the public. But, I do praise this action. So, the fact that that was almost a thing that happened is notable. Also, we talked about the Green River Killer, not just him. But during COVID, our courts said that you're not allowed to keep as many people in jail for, obvious infectious reasons. We get it. But then they thought about letting a bunch of people out of jail, and they came one vote away from, I'm not joking, releasing the Green River Killer for a few years.
I mean, if there's anyone who should remain in jail, you think it would be him.
Yeah, quite possibly. You can kind of understand the background of why people would rally in Olympia and talk about this.
Right. And Graham, she touted, some of the bills she was in favor of. So she's putting forth House Bill 1845. It would create an office, the Crime Victims Ombudsman with the State Department of Commerce. That's a mouthful. Basically, it would allow them to collect data, that maybe gets lost in the justice system, give crime victims a place to go if they feel they're not being heard.
So I want to flip it around, though, and talk about you going and covering this. Some of this is grisly stuff. I mean, literally, did you just feel like you had to take a shower afterwards? Or
I mean, you try to stay as detached as you can because you're there to cover a story, but you can't help but, feel for the people who are impacted by these crimes. So, at the time, I didn't get, too involved or too emotional about it, but later writing the story, it was a little bit more emotional, listening to what people had to say and taking it in more. So yeah, it's just amazing what these people have been through. It seems like a lot of times they're victimized again by the system. Maybe I'm editorializing a bit too much, but that's how it comes across.
Well, listeners can keep up with this and other sometimes grisly stories at thecentersquare.com. For Brett Davis, this is Jeremy Lott. Please subscribe and thank you for listening.